Alright, I'm gonna be going ahead and discussing the role of the fucking ego and as to what's really supposed to be whenever it comes to us and its really functions. Really, the functions thereof. And essentially, it's supposed to be a fucking gatekeeper. It's supposed to be able to keep information out, certain information, and it's supposed to bring certain information in. Now, granted, whenever you know that something is bullshit, you know it, therefore you don't need to accept it. Now, granted, whenever it comes down to the element in which it serves, it's supposed to be a self preservation part of the psyche, and which keeps this fucking body going. Whenever it comes to training and all that, believe it or not, all these self improvement shits are actually ego boosting. They are. That's why whenever it comes to Tyler Durden and fucking Fight Club, he said self improvement is masturbation. He's not fucking wrong on that. Okay. Now it doesn't mean it's a bad thing, because whenever it comes to the ego, what is it supposed to do? It's supposed to guard, right? So whenever it comes to like us, whenever it comes to us, identifying with the ego and confining ourselves to what we think we are, that's not the truth, though. See, whenever it comes down to the ego, it's simply a channeler of the substance beneath it, in which that's supposed to be like the one or some shit, in which shows the interconnecting dots between everything and really show the lack of difference between ourselves and everything else in our environment. Now, whenever it comes down to like fasting and all that, that's actually supposed to pretty much provide a higher vantage point whenever it concerns the boundaries of what we think the ego allows us to see. And like, for instance, if there's a particular set in which you're still and stuck and shit, then here's the thing, is that whenever it comes to fasting and all that, and time alone, all that energy, it's got to go somewhere. So it's not going to your muscle groups, so it's got to go to the brain. Now, whenever it comes to firing those neurons, it's going to be producing more norepinephrine and shit like that. And which, granted, whenever you're able to sit in this and not be fucking, what's the word for it? Jittery. Jittery with energy in which you don't know what to do with. But learning how to actually sit with that energy in which it's built up. Like, for instance, seed retention and all that. And why motherfuckers would sometimes not do anything and just allow it to build up. Because, well, they're really focusing that energy upwards instead of, well, these, okay? And what else can I really serve in the function of what I'm really providing? So essentially, the ego is supposed to represent Satan in this regards. And what's not the ego, I guess, is supposed to represent God. Now, granted, whenever it comes to Satan and his role, now I'll go ahead and get into several concepts of which Carl Jung had in his vision of how he pretty much saw Satan in his visions, in which he said that Satan is essentially the element of joy, in which that's one of his names. That's one of Satan's names, is joy. And in one other account from another practitioner, in which, in their vision, they said that Satan was pretty much the element in which is the need to do, or pretty much to do without needing to think. Essentially, the impulse behind the action itself. Okay? Now, this is only times in which you've, like, for instance, for people that are selfless a lot of the times, see, whenever they don't feed into themselves, but feed into everybody else around them, there's nothing in which they can give from, because that's what the ego does. It's supposed to keep the energies of others and yourself in check, so that way they're not intermingled and fucked up. Like, for instance, a motherfucker that's always helping others, okay? Always helping others, not helping themselves. Do you really see any benefit that they can get from it? I mean, can they really gift? Can they really give anything if they have no energy in which they can pretty much put into themselves, that way they can give in the first place? See, this is the element between the right hand and the left hand path. The left-hand path is self-individuation, the dark side, shit like that, the tumultuousness of going on beyond the borders of one's own weaknesses, especially whenever it came to speech. For me, I had to definitely work on that. That was essentially my act of sacrifice, was I had to sacrifice the element of which wasn't willing to do the action. So I had to really commit to the action. It's like, for instance, if you don't talk to a lady in what you think is fucking hot, then what happened? Well, you subjected yourself to that voice in your head, which told you, no, you can't do it. You can't do it. Essentially, he's that voice in which tells you where you need to go because he tells you not to do it. Now, is that meaning that he's, bad and all that shit? No. It's just people make themselves subject to that voice, in which, well, let's just say, whenever it comes to us, whenever we don't know the substance of ourselves, we hate what we see. Like, for instance, whenever it comes to narcissists and all that, do you think they hurt people because they love themselves? No, they don't. I mean, don't get me wrong. They'll say they fucking love themselves, but no, they fucking truly don't. Okay? Whenever it comes down to their premise for their shit, is that, oh, well, this happened to me, therefore this is how it is whenever it comes to everything else around me. No, it's not. It's essentially a lesson for us to learn upon our own merits, and which is not guided by another. And whenever it comes to, like, letting, God be God and surrendering your problems and all that, it doesn't mean you don't fucking sit and observe the problems in which you're facing at this moment. And, for instance, questions. I'll go ahead and get into the questions. I'll go ahead and what would I suggest? Go ahead and pause it real quick just to allow myself to think and really get myself back on the train here. Okay, this is a really good one to note. Okay, whenever it comes to circumstances, whenever you see it through the ego, here's what you see, okay? Is that you see it as personal. But whenever you see it through God's eyes, it's impersonal, okay? Whenever it comes to the ego, it's not bad. In fact, it's supposed to be changing. It's not supposed to stay the same, all right? Whenever it comes down to it, it's supposed to be the channeler of the substance. But if it's not changing, then it's cut off from the substance itself. It's dying. Okay? Now, there is a sacrificial element to it. Going beyond the borders of, facing that voice in your head. All right? In which, whenever it comes to David Goggins and all them, they are sort of fucking occultists and don't know it. Because whenever it comes down to it, where you need to go is the parts in which you don't want to go. Wherever there's an obstacle is precisely where you need to fucking pass over. And that's pretty well stated by Carl Jung. So whenever it comes down to that voice, you need to find it. You need to know where it is. And whatever it's talking about, whatever it's really feeding into you, okay? You got to allow yourself to feel it, of course. Now, granted, whenever it comes down to it, here's the thing, is that if you do allow yourself to feel it, and really feel it, you're going to notice something. You're going to notice that there's an observer element. And that observer element is what's going to allow you to dictate, okay, I can either let this go or I can't. Or I don't want to. Why? Because here's the thing, is that whenever one does let it go, that's essentially choosing the very act of freedom itself, free will. Now, granted, a lot of people don't want free will. A lot of people don't want freedoms. You'd be surprised, whenever it comes to a first world country, this country right here, nobody's really exercising many freedoms. I mean, for instance, they'll hide their face on fucking social media and say what they need to say, right? But here's the thing, is that they don't want to attach themselves to what they say. They don't want to, bear the reciprocations of what they say. Whenever it comes down to me, yes, do I say some shit in which, granted, I fucking need to revise and stuff? Of course. Why? Because whenever it comes to my eyes, they're always changing. And that's essentially a cyclical process of death and rebirth. Because if you're always seeing the world through one set of eyes, what's new? Well, all is vanity. Because, well, goddamn, just da-da-da-da-da-da. Everything's the same. Nothing's changing. Why? Because your eyes haven't changed. I guess whenever it comes down to this vid, I'll go ahead and call it quits because goddamn, the fucking storage on my phone is little as shit. I'm not joking.